Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Philip Cuenco, and I'm a producer and instructor for the Leica Academy team here in the United States. Or thank you, actually, for joining us for today's Leica Conversations. Today, we have a very new topic that we haven't covered all year, which is the automotive industry. And today we have Cars, Cameras, and Conversations with Ed Justice Jr. Now, Ed began his first publications when he was 14. He was actually part of a junior high photography program, and he got accepted, and that's where it all started. He's been shooting for quite a while now. He has a very big Renaissance background in the automotive industry, so we're not going to get into it too much, but we will post his bio and everything else after. But throughout all the years, Ed's acquired a mass amount of skill shooting both film, digital, all sorts of cameras, zooms, primes. We're going to be talking about ISO and grain and noise and his transition into digital and the automotive world. It's going to be a lot of fun today. And he's also been the voice of Road and Track, Motor Trend, and Car and Driver in the past. So if you've heard his voice, you'll probably notice it now if you are part of the automotive industry. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Ed Justice Jr.
Great to be here, Phil. I'm so honored to be part of this Leica Conversation program, and I'm excited to share some memories and techniques and history of photography as I've seen it for quite a while now. So I just am really looking forward to it. I know you put a lot of effort into the presentation, and we've got a lot of images over the past several decades. We'll just leave it at that.
Sounds good. And yes, we do have a lot of eye candy, folks. Now, please don't ask on every single image what the ISO was. We don't have time for that today, but we will be giving you guys some tidbits. And Ed is actually one of those types of photographers that loves to share technique and nerd out and talk about what he knows and what he's acquired over the years. So hopefully some of you take some learning away from this, especially when it comes to shooting the wide world of motorsports. So let me go ahead and get my screen back up here, Ed, and we will go ahead and just get started. You guys ready to go?
Yeah, ready to go.
All right. So Ed, why don't you take us back into early Ed? What did that look like?
Well, that's early Ed. That's 15. That's a year after I was already selling pictures to the magazines and different publications. And obviously, I was spending all my money on camera gear and not much else, and working a lot of hours to pay this stuff off. I was lucky that my parents would sport me a few bucks here and there to loan me the money, which I had to pay off. They were adamant about that. But that's turn one, Ontario Motor Speedway, and a lot of great memories with that picture. Evel Knievel, of course. I mean, gosh, there's an icon, number one selling toy at one time. And I shot Evel a number of times and got to know Evel, and he was quite a person. Don Perdome, another good friend, the Snake icon in drag racing. That's a Burnout. That's at Irwindale Drag Strip, where I got the job as the writer for the stories every week, because I couldn't get the photographer's job because that was held by my mentor and good friend, Mert Miller. But I got paid $35 a week to write the story and a free hamburger. Boy, I was really living high then.
So what was it like, shooting automotive back then? Was it kind of new to the general public, or has this something that was been going on for a while already?
Yeah, it's been going on ever since, when was the first race? The story goes when the second car was built. So it had been going on for a long time, but it was completely different back then. They didn't worry about liability as much. There weren't as many lawsuits. All that had an effect on what me or anybody else as a photographer had access to. We had far more access back then than we do today. There's Laguna Seca on the left, and I think that's Phoenix on the right, IndyCar race and a sports car race. That's shot on transparency. what most people call slide film. You know, in the industry, we call it transparency film. That's what the magazines wanted. Shot very little negative color film, very little.
Okay, so we have your earlier works obviously on film, and why don't you go ahead and just tell us a little bit about this one?
Okay, so this is, if you like film grain, this is your picture right here. A couple of these that we're going to do. This is actually police surveillance film that we stumbled upon. I don't remember who was the first to find it, but one of the fellow shooters did. And once we saw him shooting pictures without any flashes, because we all used supplemental flashes back then, hey, open up, what's the deal? And I think it was 2475 was the number, Kodak 2475 recording film. It was developed in an HC 110 developer, which is like 50 weight motor oil that you would dilute. And, you know, I mean, hey, this was 1600 ASA, just for the record, which was like big time back then. I mean, these ISO numbers that we get today with the digital cameras are just, you know, rather remarkable for somebody like me who 1600 and you had something that looked like it was shot in a gravel pit. I never was a big fan of that available light film. And frankly, I don't know how the police could use it. I don't think you could convict anybody with an image that bad. But this is a stock car. Dan Gurney on the right. That's a very, very significant picture for me. Dan Gurney, of course, a very, very famous, world famous race car driver. This was his last IndyCar race, 1970 Ontario Motor Speedway. This was at the absolute end of his IndyCar career and his primary driving career. He ran a few races after this, but not really anything. And I was a 15-year-old kid when I shot this picture. Again, working for the magazines, I walked up and I just asked him, would you mind squatting down by the car? And it's significant because you didn't have handlers. You could actually talk to the drivers back then. Motorcycle racing. This picture here is interesting because it's one of those that at the time maybe isn't a big deal, but this shows you how photography can age for the better. And this is Tommy Ivo, and he drove that Cadillac in the background. And he actually used that Cadillac to push his dragster. Now, back then it was like, hey, yeah, Tommy's got his Cadillac. And that was a new Cadillac, by the way, back then. But today people see that and they go, are you kidding me? I mean, and you know, the tape on the car for the number and all that. There's just things, you know, a lot of period things that are really cool to look back at now. And they're changing the tires, getting ready to go out on the track. And he's in his driver's suit. And, you know, I mean, it's just neat to look at now. More important now. That's Brian Redmond, famous driver in the car, and Jim Hall, another famous driver turned designer, car owner. I sold this picture to Baraxo for their media kits. And there's a whole backside story of how many prints I printed in on RC paper, and they dried on my back lawn at our house because I had to do it overnight.
Now, I know we've been covering a lot of black and white photography, but you also shot a lot of color. Actually, why don't you go ahead and take the crowd into this one?
Well, this is transparency film. This is what they call a fire burnout. And this was a clickbait for magazines, in effect, in today's parlance. You put a picture like this on the cover of the magazine or a center spread, and it would sell the magazine. Sort of like putting Pamela Anderson on the cover of Playboy, from what I've been told. And at one point. And so we put it with gasoline under the tires, and the guy would drive into it. Somebody would signal, they'd throw a match into it, and he'd hit the throttle, the driver would, this Herm Peterson in this picture, and it would throw the flames up, I mean, for a millisecond. And me or any of us that shot this type of stuff would have to click the shutter at the optimum time. And again, remember, this is a one shot. This was not shot with a motor-driven camera. This is a shot, it's a medium format picture. And you know, you walked away from doing this and you go, well, do you think you got it? Yeah, I think I got it. And it was just different. And that's a good lead in really to this film versus digital.
Right. so I looked at this shot first and I was like, oh, what year did you take this? And then you zoom in and you know it was very recent, right?
Yeah, and that's why I clicked that picture off. This is early in the COVID shutdown, and I'm in the car, and I've got that 911 ahead of me, and I've got my camera, and I intentionally framed it where you can tell I'm sitting in the car. I like that little blurred line down at the bottom, a little highlight off to the right, and I waited for the guy in the bike to come off the side and pedal across right to that position. And him on the bike, his outfit, the mask, the 911. It's sort of, to me, that was California at that point in time. People were still out living, wearing masks, and I love that shot. I think it just sort of captures that.
Right.
This early, very early on in my career as a photographer, uh, driver, completely different safety equipment by today's standards. That's all natural lighting. And I mean, you couldn't have lit that better if you had lit it in a studio, in my opinion. And I think that's just a great black and white image. This is a digital image now, very similar to that last one that was film. And this is shot with a manual focus with my M, and capturing a shot like this, and you can see how short the depth of field is. The fellow on the left, his sleeve is out of focus. And to capture, this is John Forrest, famous drag racer, to capture him when he's moving around, putting this stuff on, buckling it with manual focus is something that when you see that you nailed it, you really feel special about an image like that. Personally, I do.
Now we have them, side by side, and I guess, do you miss shooting film?
Uh, yes and no. I really overall do not miss it because first of all, I recognize why people enjoy shooting film. I've shot a ton of it. I recognize why young people like to shoot film, and I think that that is really great. I always applaud that because I think it really helps with their foundation on photography because film is just so different. But for me, in today's world, with the way people want images right now, social media, the web, etc., I love digital, particularly at the level that we have digital at today. I mean, the sensors like the SL2, the M10R, etc. I mean, you just can't beat them.
Now, we have a lot of, I'm sure we have a lot of tech heads here attending. We're gonna open this up, and we kind of want to see. Do you guys have any idea what lens he might have used on this image? And let's see if there's anything in the chat. Any guesses? We'll give you guys the answer in a second here. You got 28. All right. All right. You got 35. All right. So this was shot on Ed's 35 Summicron. Now, Ed has a very wide array of lenses, and we'll get into more lens talk later and stuff. But Ed, you chose the 35 Cron for this one, and we were talking about the headlights earlier.
Yeah, that lens, I mean, look at this, every Leica lens is legendary in its own way. I just love this 35 Summicron. And I know a lot of people would say, no, I like the 35 Summilux, and that's fine. I have a 50 Summilux. But the 35 Summicron, I think this image speaks for itself. I mean, that headlight, and that's obviously my focus point in this picture, and that reflection, wow. I mean, I just love that picture. I love the way that it was lit.
Right.
And early morning, and everything about it. I mean,
now, seeing your work side by side with digital and film, what are you preferring nowadays? Now that you have a very wide array of work to look back on, what does your eye gravitate towards on a personal level?
well, I will say this. It's part what I like personally. and a photographer has that right to deliver what we like. And it's also what the expectation of your audience expects, in particular the realm that I'm in, not shooting particularly gallery type beauty shots, say, for lack of a better description. People have a higher expectation of sharpness due to digital, whether it be 4K video, now 8K, whatever, 1080, whatever, and digital pictures. Film is a much softer medium. I mean, it just is softer. The lenses that we used on film back in the day were softer lenses. And so again, you can always soften a picture, but it's very hard to sharpen a picture after a certain point. Now, we all know you can sharpen pictures,
Right.
but let's face it, you go overboard and it's ugly. And so you can always soften a picture up, give it a filmic look if you start out with a tack sharp digital image. So I prefer digital just because today everybody wants to have the images like right now.
Yeah, and when I first saw this one, I thought it was film, but actually, when you sent me the image and the metadata, it was from the M10.
Yes, and I think that's a classic image for the M10. I love uh, I love shooting. I'm not a big fan of silver cars per se. Uh, Auto designers, most people may not know this, but they love to introduce cars in silver because it shows the contours. I love photographing silver cars for that reason. And color black and white. I mean, there's a silver car in the background of this picture. And this, I mean, look at that wire wheel. This is what attracts me. That's my focus point on this. I framed this picture intentionally to include the danger. This was at an airport, a concours at an airport. And they just parked the cars like that. And when I walked up and I saw that and it's rear lit, and I love the way that the softness of the highlights because of the short depth of field. It's not wide open, but it's not all the way stopped down either, and it's exactly what I wanted. And that to me, I love that image, and that's more of a gallery type shot for sure.
Right. And we've got a film question actually, Ed. Did you push your processing in the wet chemistry days, or did you process your own wet chemistry? And
Oh yeah.
was it good to double or triple the ISO or ASA back then?
Okay, push or pull those subject matters that are forgotten subject matters by today's, pushing. Now it's just cranking it up or down. Yes, I did develop all my own black and white, and I enjoyed every bit of that. I've smelled plenty of photochemicals, et cetera. Those memories are still with me. I never developed color. Most everybody I know didn't do color. It was much more technical, different chemistry, et cetera, et cetera. I actually got to the point to where my mentor and I, him particularly, he was mixing his own microdol. You could buy the raw materials, and he had a special mix. I mean, it was pretty amazing, And I liked microdol over D76 because it was just a little bit tighter grain. And of course, the temperature that you developed it at had an effect on the grain. The old, expansion by a hot temperature. So I didn't push film a lot, and I didn't pull it a lot. The majority of my work I shot at 400 on Tri-X. I did push sometimes to 1600, and you'd have a better result sometimes in that recording film. But I didn't push my film a lot, no.
Yeah, and now that you've got the M10 monochrome and the M10, you actually shoot with a lot of high ISO. We've noticed on this one we zoomed in at 100% here, and you're using 6400 ISO on that. Compared to modern, we were talking last week. We weren't even calling it digital noise anymore. We were calling it a digital grain.
It is a digital grain to me. I mean, it is because it's organic now. It's not pixels anymore. It's, you look at the grain on these images anymore, and it's organic. And I actually like the grain today. I mean, look at the resolution on that. And that was my focus point, obviously. That's the monochrome with the Oppo, and I think that's a great picture to show that. And look at that. Just for a point of fact, that's at 5.6, and it's still short depth of field. You know, you don't. I find that people today, particularly with autofocus cameras, tend to shoot a little bit more wide open than we ever did back in the day. Because you can see whether you got the shot or not today. And autofocus protects you. I mean, you just paint the target and focus and boom, you got it. You know, we would shoot when racing, like that picture on the left, that was probably shot at f/16, 500th at f/16 with Tri-X. That was a sunny day. And the one on the right is a digital shot. And different. I mean, look at the one on the left is an iconic picture. It's got a lot of emotion to it.
And now you've gotten to a point in your life where you could look back and have some very similar shots that you've taken over the years and stuff. And it's just interesting to see, the difference between what you were doing with your M4 and Tri-X and stuff. And I guess was Tri-X your preferred film back then?
Yeah, it was. I think, in my opinion, Tri-X was a game-changing film. It came out in the mid-50s, and that's what the majority of history from that point on by photojournalists was captured on. I shot plus X, but at 125, I did shoot some Panatomic X, that was the 25 speed. But that was for action pictures. It really was not good. Right. And but to just mention real quick, a high ISO on digital photography, you have to retrain yourself if you're used to the old days, and I fully have. I do not ever hesitate to go high ISO on any of these high quality digital cameras today. Not at all. I crank it to whatever it takes to get the shot, and I do not hesitate. I mean, yeah, 50,000, some of those, but if that's what it took to get the shot, I would do it, if I was in a situation, because a shot's more important than a little bit of digital noise or digital grain, as we said.
Yeah, and you have quite a lot of black and white work now. What drives you to shoot more black and white nowadays than the color itself?
Well, I think any of us that love black and white will, I think, agree that black and white is a very expressive medium. I can focus your eye a lot more on that 427 turbojet logo with black and white and forcing the focus there, versus if the ground were brown or whatever, it might draw your eye away. And as a photographer, I have a much greater control over the message I'm sending and the dramatic impact, and also the contours, the tones, the reflections. Look, I'm a big fan of Ansel Adams. His photography has had a big effect on me, and this will probably come up again in technique. Contrast is important, but like the drama in that picture, I mean, that's just, obviously, I mean, the grill is the critical thing in this picture, and that's the point. And yeah, I mean, there's the focus point. This is a little bit different angle of that car. And again, the Greyhound, that hood ornament, which was an option by Ford, that's the point.
Now, photographing all these years, has your interest in the subject matter changed at all, or do you still have the same passion you did when you're 14-year-old Ed? Cars. I mean, do they get old after a while?
No,
so long.
you know what? I don't know. Maybe I'm obsessed, and I call it passion. I have probably 8,000 images on my tablet that I carry with me. And I can sit down and look at images that I've looked at 300 times before and still be fascinated. And I'm constantly analyzing what I've shot. And that's not exaggeration. I mean, that's for real. I'm constantly looking at new angles, new things to shoot. Cropping is critical. Cropping is just as critical as capturing the picture. And a lot of people capture great images, but they crop the image wrong. And I mean, I've shot pictures from down on the ground of race cars. I've shot them from on top of ladders. I've shot them from buildings of race cars, variety of angles, from behind, from in front, dead front, 3/4 front, as we call it, 3/4 rear, dead behind. I mean, I think I've covered just about every possible angle, but I think there probably might be some other new angles out there.
Well, speaking of angles, this car has quite a different angle than the other cars we've been looking at. Where is this car?
Yeah, and they said here, Antonio said, put all your questions for me in the Q&A. Okay, which is fine, because I'm happy to answer any questions. That's the Spaceballs car that was from the movie Spaceballs, a Princess Leia, or Princess Vespa in the movie, but Princess Leia character, the spoof. It was built by a friend of mine, Dean Jeffries, who built the Monkey Mobile and the original Green Hornet car. And I actually own this car, among the many other cars that we own. And it was Mercedes actually gave it a designation. It's an SEL, and I love that car. This is all about the focus point of that. This was shot at the Art Center Car Classic car show, a fantastic show that's put on at the Art Center every year that I happen to also MC along with a good friend of mine, Dave Coons. And they have some killer cars on display, and I always shoot before I go. This image, I love the logo. There's another headlight to the right of this headlight. It didn't make sense to me. This is all about repeating pattern, but as you focus in here, and as I so clearly saw when I shot this and I zoomed in on the back screen, the Oppo and the monochrome are relentless at pointing out flaws.
Yeah, you gotta get a new detailer for this.
The guy drove it there, obviously. And I mean, you look at that detail. If I were going to shoot this for a feature, like we used to do for the magazines, obviously they would really have to detail. Look at the hair at the top of the V above the zero. I mean, as a guy going out just shooting, this is just a cars and coffee type of thing. I can't even begin, nor would I even want to try and clean that car up, but still great shot for social media. Here's a good example again of the monochrome and the Oppo. That's an overflow tank on a top fuel car that's sitting behind me here in the picture that I'm in. And I mean, look at the texture on the aluminum. And that's shot under fluorescent light. Obviously, I moved the camera to get the reflection, the highlighting where I wanted. Again, I mean, you're the photographer. You control as much as you can control. And, you give any of us that know what we're doing an inch, and we're going to take a foot, of course. I love that shot. It has a softness about it. That's the first victory at Le Mans for Porsche. Iconic car, and again, framed intentionally like that for effect. Yeah, now there's a good example of digital grain. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and what we're gonna do is we got some questions about the track axis and stuff. We will have a segment on that. Because he had so much black and white, we had to just put some of his work together, both on a personal and professional level. And we talked about this one, Ed. You're a fan of the flare.
Yeah. Now I think that flare just adds a sort of interest to this picture. That's actually my left hand in the right position, distance from the lens, and also in the right position where it's reflecting a certain amount of light. Obviously, if I turned it one way, it could be dark. And if I turned it another way, it could be light. And so I put that there just to give it a little bit of flair. That's just nothing more than my left hand.
Now, do you ever use a tripod nowadays, or mostly handheld?
I'm not a big tripod because the world that I grew up in is all about shooting pictures on the fly. I use a tripod, but I really don't use it much. This one here now, this is my left hand in the lower right corner, but in a parking structure, it comes out black. And I could have done that for sure in Photoshop, but I try to shoot everything as much as I can in camera. Now, I'm not knocking the use of Photoshop and or retouching. I have no problem with that. I think it's done. It's essential for some imagery, and I think it's just part of the process. And just for example, I own a monochrome, and I love the monochrome, and I love everything that the monochrome stands for and what it does. Okay, I obviously get it, but this picture here is shot with an M10, and the M10 is no slouch when it comes to black and white imagery. And again, it's a 1600 ASA or ISO to use today's.
Right. Now, before we get into our next section, we're going to talk about racing in general. We're not going to get too technical about the camera settings and stuff, but Ed's going to talk more about the story. If you ever get fortunate to film a race in the future, he's just going to talk about some of the broad elements. Now, really quick, we're looking at the questions here, and I got one from John. Ed, with all this car talk, what's your daily driver?
All right. Well, I
know it's a personal question.
I have the opportunity to drive a lot of cars, but my actual daily driver is a 911 Turbo S, and which means I get to and from work, in a very nice way. And that's just a phenomenal car. I've owned a number of 911s in my life. I've owned a number of turbos. And I actually have that's a 2018 Turbo S. I have a 2010 Turbo and an 88 Turbo. And all three of them are three different cars, but yeah, phenomenal car.
So you sent me this establishing shot, and zooming in, I noticed these, and I photographed races myself, but I've never really noticed these before.
Yeah, they look like shower curtains up there. What they are, they're sort of like that. They're little booths that the team members construct, and that's where the guys up there are called spotters. They actually talk to the pit, and they talk, more importantly, to the drivers in the car. This is for the Rolex 24 race at Daytona International Speedway, a 24-hour race. And in the middle of the night, let me tell you something, it gets cold up there. That is way high, and it's way windy because the water's not far from the track. And I've been up there many times, and those guys, they need that. They'll have a little heater, and they'll tell the driver in the car whether a car's on the left or the right, and hopefully avoid collisions and all. Yeah, great, just different shots. These are all IMSA sports car series, which is really a great series as a amateur photographer to have the opportunity to shoot, because there are certain tracks around the US that are really amateur photographer friendly. Road America in Elkhart Lake, Wisconsin, WeatherTech Raceway in Laguna Seca in Monterey, California. Daytona International Speedway, you can shoot there as an amateur and get some decent shots. This is some of the behind the scenes in the garage area. They're getting the cars ready. I like to show the shop, the process, to let people into what it's all about. I love doing that. Here's a couple. The one on the left is the actual driver of that car with his son. Auto racing is a family sport. And that young guy got Rookie of the Year in NHRA drag racing. On the right is Wayne Taylor, very well-known former driver, Hall of Famer, and also now a team owner, very successful team owner. His cars has won the last 3 out of the 4 Rolex 24s, which is phenomenal. He's talking to Mark Royce, who's the president of General Motors. And it was just a great opportunity. I know both of those gentlemen, and a great opportunity to capture them. And I think Mark's expression adds a lot to that picture. It's like, you don't know whether he doesn't buy what Wayne's saying, or it's like, really? And this is before the race. So
Now, to get access to this, can the average person get this, or do they need special credits? And if so, what would you advise for people that want to try to capture the life of the race that most people don't see from the stands?
okay, well, how do you get a pass? Okay, boy, that is the most toughest to answer question. You have to get an assignment from some sort of legitimate media, and that can't be your personal website or blog site. Okay, they've been hit by this a million times. So how do you get a member of the media to give you an assignment? Well, you have to have a portfolio of work. So how do you get a portfolio of work without actually getting a pass? Well, you have to attend lower level events where you have greater access. How do you hone your craft? You have to, I've known a lot of photographers who've been hired by big time people that are not motorsports photographers, and they really don't know what they're doing. And you can see it in their work. So, I mean, where can you get experience shooting moving objects? Well, an airport is one thing. Shoot airplanes. I was out at an airport with my 7-year-old granddaughter, gave her a camera and, autofocus. And I mean, just eye-hand coordination and all was great for her. The teams keep track of data on tire temperatures, tire inflation and all that. That's shot with the SL2, just for a technical side. The skin tone color is excellent.
Now, don't go taking pictures of this guy's fingerprints and using it, for for purchasing things or anything, guys.
All of that, yeah, all of that, dirt, the nails, or whatever, that's all part of the message there. The dirty knuckles, that's a working man. And there's a lot of girls too, I might add, on the teams that their hands would probably not look far off from that. But that's every time the car comes in off the track, they always take tire pressure and tire temp, and they take tire temp across the top of the tire, outside sidewall, dead center, because they're wide tires. They take it all across the tire, and that tells you on what type of grip they're getting, et cetera, et cetera. Tires. Tires are a big part of auto racing. There's lots of tires around. And here they are coming out of the garage. That hand of that guy is actually the guy that's at the left front of the car there with the headset on. That's the same fellow. And this car would go on to win the race. Again, third time in 4 years, that exact car, that Cadillac, sponsored by Konica Minolta, dominated that race. In sports car racing, they do run in bad weather. Literally sometimes near flood conditions. So most of us have gear for that. We have, when you're in a pinch, I have used cleaning bags or whatever else. But I have nylon pants, over pants, et cetera, and all that. They came in. That car has air jacks on it, air jacks that are actually part of the car. They hook an air hose to the car when it comes in, and it raises the car up so they don't have to use any manual jacking. And that's part of what you're seeing there. That's shot with the SL2 also. This image here, these guys, Ricky Taylor being interviewed, Elio Castro Neves in the background. They won the championship this year. And that picture is all about, to me, Elio's look at Ricky. It's not about Ricky being interviewed. It's about the relationship that is obviously portrayed in this image. That's not a look of contempt. That's not a look of jealousy. that's a look of admiration. That's a look of respect. And these two really did and do have a great relationship. And two really nice guys in auto racing. And I love that I captured that image, because I think as time goes by, this is one of those images that it becomes that much better. It just ages very, very well.
Now, with all this going on here, I was kind of pixel peeping the shot. You know, when you first sent, I was actually pixel peeping a lot of your shots. And as we zoomed in more, the thing that struck me the most was that you didn't use the 90 to 280 on this. You used the 24 to 90. And as we zoomed in, you know, it was pretty sharp. So,
frankly, that blew me away. And, you know, a fellow in the chat mentioned, and I do want to mention this on the video, that you can, for a lot of events, buy a hot pass. And Jean-Marie also mentioned that you just need to stay out of the way. When you're at a racetrack, look at, you have to be heads up all the time. And so, yes, where you can buy a hot pass, if you want to do this type of thing, that's one of the other things you can do. And I highly recommend it.
So this takes us into our next portion of the talk, which is going to be mostly about focus and motion. We've had questions in the past about people wanting us to talk more about the technique and stuff. So we're going to do it. And Ed is willing to part with some of his knowledge that he's acquired over the years dealing with speed. So I'm excited. I already learned a lot from him as well, even though I've shot for quite a while. So let's go ahead and we'll take him into these boat shots, Ed. First
okay.
Of all,
this is transparency. This was not autofocus. This is in the Gulf of Mexico. I'm in a helicopter. They told me at certain times in the helicopter, we were literally 10 feet off the water. You know what? I'm too busy shooting pictures hanging out the side. I had nothing but a lap belt on in this helicopter. And that's been the case in a lot of times when I've been in a helicopter. No special harness, all that. Just a lap belt that I promise you, I've made sure has been tight, and hanging out with the door off the Bell Jet Ranger. So here's the challenge on pictures like this back in the day. You've got two moving objects, and the boat is going up and down, and it can go side to side, and the same thing for the helicopter and your manual focus. So obviously you're going to try and crank the f-stop down to more f11, f16, and to give you a greater depth of field, which is a cushion factor. You had to. And again, you leave the chute, you have no idea what you have got. So you can do it. I mean, we had to do it. This is the SL2. The critical thing on this image to me is that the driver's names are dead sharp. A lot of the other car is not sharp. And because the center of the lens is moving at the same speed as where those names are. The other parts of the car are moving at a different speed. And that yellow line in the off to the right was critical. This one obviously framed to accentuate, that yellow line. I timed that just for that reason, because I think that's just part of the graphic element of this image, along with the color in the background.
Now, we did have a question talking about a Formula One crash over the weekend, and we didn't include any crashes onto this, Ed. So the customer wants to know, or the attendee wants to know, did you ever take photos of crashes? And if so, what impact was that emotionally?
Okay, so yeah, I've shot a lot of crashes, and I've actually shot a lot of cars off to the side after the crash, and sometimes been presented with a knuckle sandwich, potential knuckle sandwich, just to be clear on that, because it's been termed or looked at by some people to be callous or cold. As I said in the blog, I've learned to shoot first, ask questions later. Anybody capturing history, you have to. There's that unbelievable image of Robert Kennedy laying after he had been shot. Boris Yarrow is one of the people that got that picture. There was a few. Think of the presence of mind to pull the trigger on that. And I've always looked at it that way, but the importance of what those pictures can mean after the fact. And many times the pictures that have been questioned at the time when I've shot them of a crash or whatever, have later come back and been used to figure out what went wrong and to reconstruct. And were the belts, did they cut the safety belts to get the person out, or were the belts broken? Et cetera. I mean, all that stuff can be really critical, and particularly if lawsuits happen. And so the impact emotionally, it's never a good thing, and particularly if it's close to you. I've had cars hit the wall right next to me, and I think this is relatively safe, although there's always, you know, it's like life itself. There's always a certain danger. But yeah, it's never fun. I mean, I don't go to shoot crashes. It's just part of the deal. This image here, this is shot from a public area and intentionally. And I might add is that myself and a lot of the other photographers that I shoot next to today, we shoot from public areas because you get a different angle and different atmosphere, shoot through trees and all this other stuff that we might do. And this was shot through the fence. Now, the fence itself is not pretty. It's actually obnoxious. But when you slow the shutter speed down and pan, it actually makes a very interesting texture. And I love this shot because of that. And you know, I went to a point where I had interesting color in the background too. Because when you blur in the background like that green, it's all going to be there. And again, I'm not going in changing the color of the background and all that. I mean, this is journalistic, photojournalism. And this picture has a certain amount of digital grain, which is what I would consider, in my opinion, grittiness, which adds to the texture of those horizontal lines of the fence. And again, the angle that I'm shooting this at, if you look above the car, you will see there's a cable actually in that image. Where that cable is critical. I didn't want the cable lower, and I'm somewhat hiding it, you know, where it is. So again, the up and down is just as important as the side to side.
Now this one, this was one of my favorite shots because looking at up close, you're like, oh, it's a cool motion blur shot. But when you zoom in, you actually see the separation of the background and the foreground. You know, I guess there's the thing online nowadays for people starting off with photography. They want to get that out of focus background, but they don't realize depth of field can essentially be created with shutter speed.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, a lot of those older images you see are shot at f/16, and people would think they're shot more wide open. I have somewhat of a problem with this fixation of shooting wide open on everything. I mean, I shoot pictures wide open, but I hope people explore more stopping lenses down and realizing that sometimes really it's nice to have, particularly if it's historic, to have more data in front of you in the image. This one obviously, you know, it was at 640, but the car is traveling at a very high rate of speed. So shutter speed is relative to distance, to speed of car. I mean, and this one I shot it with the 90 280 lens, and I love that lens. And I've read where some people think it's big and heavy. If you think that's a big and heavy lens, I've got a few I'll let you hold. I mean, it's not. I used to shoot a 50 to 300 lens that Nikon made. The nickname for that lens for any of us that owned it was the boat anchor. I mean, that thing, you could kill somebody with it. And
with so much stuff going on, and I mean, everyone just sees a car, but they don't realize the wheels, the smoke, and all that. So, what's your target point usually when you focus it? Are you using spot focus? Are you using tracking?
okay,
You ever
yeah,
do manual?
yeah. Here's the thing: autofocus is both a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because you know you can get more, you can capture more. At a road race, I can focus on, I can capture images of the car entering the turn. I can capture pictures of the car in the middle of the turn, and I can capture pictures of the car leaving the turn, all in focus, all at different distances. You never could do that with manual focus, okay? So that's the blessing. The curse is learning what settings work for you. And let me tell you, even for somebody like me, that can take a while. And so that's just strictly trial and error, trial and error. And again, the airport, other places, shooting cars on the highway, freeway, you know, you want to get where people don't think you're threatening them with a camera, but you know, I mean, get where you can actually shoot it and nobody cares. This image is a good example of relativity of shutter speed. Al Unser Jr. in the cockpit, coming down the pit lane. This is pre the Indy 500, part of the pre-race show. He's not going that fast, and I knew if I shot that image at a shutter speed that stopped him, it would be a very boring image, no emotion. And I wanted to capture him going by with the crowd and all. And this is where, you know, luck is at the preparation and opportunity. Well, this was that luck. I was prepared and I had the opportunity. I cranked the shutter speed slower, very quickly. And as he came by, I clicked off this picture, and I was the luck of him giving the fellow the thumbs up and the guy pointing at him. And that's what makes this image. And, you know, luck is, you know, F8 and be there, as the old saying says.
Now, some people were asking about using shutter priority. So if you look back at the video later on, some of the metadata had a parenthesis with the S or the A on it. That meant that he shot it in aperture priority if it had the parenthesis A. If you saw the parenthesis S, that was a shutter priority. But Ed, most of the ones we showed them with the cars in movement, most of those were shutter priority, yes?
Yes, absolutely. Because when you're particularly if you're shooting a blur shot, the aperture doesn't matter, in my opinion. I'm sure that somebody might argue that point, but hey, you know what? I've done this for multiple decades, and it makes no difference because it's blurred, and so unless you want to just have the front of the car sharp and the rear of the car drop away, okay, but yeah, no, it's all about the shutter speed on those pan shots, those blur shots, and you know, look at it. Going back to the manual days, we had 1,000th of a second. That was all we had. I never shot at 1,000th. 500th was what most of us shot at. Because if you start going shooting shutter priority and you start going up into these high shutter speeds we have today, even at 1,000th, you can make the car look like it's parked on the track. Well, nobody wants that. I mean, really, if you're doing that, you know, try something else because you just don't want to be doing that. And so these high shutter speeds, in my opinion, for me as a shooter, enable me to shoot more wide open without an ND filter. And if it's bright enough, then I might have to throw a neutral density filter on.
Now, Ed, we're going to a different part of the automotive world, which is the community side of it. And we had Cars, Coffee, and Conversations. There's coffee meetups, and then there's Luftgegult. Now, we could talk about Luftgegult on its own hour, but we're just going to cover a few elements of what it's like to be on the lawn and when the cars are parked in their natural habitat, not being out in the wild, right?
Right. Okay. So this is at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance, the grandfather of all Concours d'Elegances in Pebble Beach, California. As you can see, looking at the date, it's the 28 Elmerit. I love that lens. It's the smallest lens that Leica makes today. It's a little pancake lens. If you shoot it without the lens shade, it's really small. You throw the lens shade on, it looks like a bigger lens. But I put a 28 because I'm going with one camera because I'm in a suit and I just want to capture some early pictures. I go with a 28 because the crowd can be what it is. And I love the look of the 28. Yeah, this was, I came out the front of a hotel. There was a 911 sitting there. It had been raining. And that's when I shot that picture. Uh, that I wanted this to have that synergy. This was coming down a street in Carmel, California, a classic California hot rod. And this is, it's got that look, that synergy. And intentionally, I did that. To me, what makes this picture is the ribbons being tack sharp and then having the reflection of the trees above in the glass.
Now, the next few shots you've got are Luftgegelt. Now, for some of you that might not know what that is, Ed, do you want to take them into that world a little bit and explain what it is?
Yeah, it's sort of, I've been to every one of them. I went to the very first one. It was held in a small parking lot in Venice, California. And it has blossomed into this amazing Porsche air-cooled culture show. Luftgekühlt means air-cooled in German. Luft, air, like Lufthansa. And that's, I'm not going to go any further on my German because it would be dangerous. But anyway, it is an amazing event. It's held at a different, unique venue. That one shot of the car in front of that building that looked like City Hall, that actually was the Back to the Future City Hall. That City Hall's been used in so many events or movies. Right there, yeah, that's the Back to the Future City Hall. And that's a rear lit shot. You can tell if you look in the upper left, that's the sun coming down and exposed accordingly. And they've had it at a lumber yard. They've had it at the docks. This one shot coming up.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't been to Luftgegelt, you have to go the next time they do it. It's probably one of the greatest, not even Porsche, but just automobile gatherings in general ever. I think it's such a fun, casual, one day quick event, and then you're like, oh, the fun's over.
This is one of my all-time favorite pictures. This is one when I was looking at what to get and all, and I pictured this angle and everything, and then I waited for the people to be in the right place, in the right position. And there's a really excellent artist in England that is amazingly talented guy. And when he saw this image, he said, which really made me feel good. I mean, he said, there's just so much right about that image. I don't even know where to start. And what I see right about it is obviously the framing of the car in the foreground. The car in the center is in white, its angle. The guys by the car are not looking at the camera, so nobody's revealed. And the girl up in the upper left, I've cropped half her head out, so you could never make her out in a lineup. And the color of the cars, and plus down at the very bottom, there is a bit of water that's given us just a touch of reflection. Reflections are just magical in photography. Just one of the other things, like the reflection of the trees and that other image we just saw a minute ago. I love this picture. I mean, This picture, I forever will be a fan of this picture.
Yeah, for those that were there, I think everyone was talking about how it was the coldest, wettest, most miserable condition one, but the most photogenic because of the clouds and the reflections of all the puddles on the ground.
Yeah. This picture, now this was at that same one. This was down at the docks. This picture, I'll use this as an example to say, people always wait for people to get out of their pictures. I want to get the picture. And, you look at a lot of these pictures that are shot and there's no people around. And, 10, 20 years from now, they'll go, did anybody attend this event? And you go, well, yeah, there were a lot of people. Yeah, but there's no people, there's no humanity, there's no, what was going on. So I, long time ago, learned to love people and pictures because they have a story to tell too. And these people in this picture are important to me in this picture. First of all, they frame this image. And the guy in the left, him pulling up a smartphone. Unfortunately, he's one of those smartphone photographers. Not that I don't shoot pictures occasionally, but but very few. But anyway, and the fact that you can see the car and that and all, that just, it tells a story. And I think that's good. Now, the problem, once you start shooting pictures like this with people, is that they're going to start moving out of your way. And I'm constantly telling people, no, please don't, no, I'm fine. You know, go ahead and shoot your picture because I want them in the picture. So that's the other side to the story.
Yeah, and it's great that you're getting the people because Lufgegeld is probably one of the, I guess, largest gathering of other Leica photographers. Like we were talking, like we saw like 50 people shooting Leicas all day. And it's not that it's something you don't see, and it goes to back to the statement with our regional manager Ebby, saying Leica owners love Porsches and Porsche owners love Leicas. So
True to that.
Now it takes us to our final stretch of the program. I know we're going a little over the hour. We'll take a few minutes on this, but this is pre-COVID, right before Ed started getting his gears wound up with the SL2 and really embracing it, and then COVID hit. So this is these are the images from mostly his SL2 and his M10 and his M10 monochrome. And we're gonna just go through these images really quick while Ed talks about his uses with the gear and where he's at now with the digital gear.
Yeah, well, I got the SL2 very early on. I was very lucky. I mean, it just happened. I wasn't on any special list or anything. I just got it very early on, and so I was able to use it and get familiar with it. And so the first two races of the year were the Rolex 24, which we've seen some of those pictures, and this is at the NHRA Winter Nationals. And the Rolex 24, I only had the 24 to 90, and I made that work, knowing that with the big sensor that there was a ability to crop also. And I realized, okay, I want to get the 90 to 280. I ordered the 90 to 280, got it before the Winter Nationals, and went out there with the 90 to 280 and loved the lens, and shot the 90 to 280 at the drags. Drag racing is unlike any other form of racing to shoot. It's literally, for lack of a better word, violent when you're standing next to the guardrail and those cars go by, because they're 10,000 horsepower. It's in what I would say a controlled explosion, just amazing. And you want to turn the other way when they come by. It's not the place to go or to get an assignment to if it's your first time shooting auto racing. Start with something else. Drag racing, it'll get you. So this is at Daytona. This is with the 24 to 90 on the SL2, and just great. I mean, the camera works fantastic. And
now on these, what focusing system we're using on these? Do you
tracking continuous? Yeah, in general terms, I don't remember all the other stuff because once I figured out that type of stuff, I have to refer back to the menu, to be honest, and I don't remember. But tracking, and they got the presets, wild animals, small children, they're actually sort of fun, and like that shot, the focus point is obviously on that number 3 on the door, and that again is where the camera and the car are traveling at the same speed. This is available light with the SL2, very low light, no supplemental lighting. I do own Leica flashes. I know a lot of people don't feel they need a flash today. Flash photography is its own animal. It's a completely different look. And I was raised in flash photography. I still love flash photography. I do love available or natural light, as many call it today. But that's a great image, and that's really high ISO, and it's clean. That's a clean image. I mean, that's and this is
your closing shot here.
Yeah, look, it's much easier to shoot a blurry shot than it is than a dead tack sharp one. But you just can't go out and crank the shutter speed down and shoot great blurry shots, because the framing of this is a key in the car and all that. and these type of shots are what I call more editorial shots. These are not a shot that you would necessarily sell to a sponsor on the car because you can't read their name. So these are more editorial, great opening shot on a website or a 2-page spread in a magazine with a headline and copy off to the right. You know what I mean? And you always, if you're a photographer and you're shooting for a magazine or whatever, you always have to take that in mind, and you have to deliver a variety for the art director to give them the creativity. They can't always be framed tight, and they can't all be framed wide. But you know, I mean, you have to. Art directors like to have their own freedom. And as a photographer, you can't always control that, and nor should you want to, because the art director, they have their own talent and their own eyes. So you give them plenty of content, you're gonna get hired.
Yeah, when I first started out, someone told me, when you're photographing, always take one for you and always take one for the crowd. And I never knew what that really meant until I started having to deliver shots. Now, I hope we got through most of the questions or all of them. We tried to get to as many as we could. We're going to go ahead, and we've got a little Instagram plugin for Ed. He's got a couple of accounts here, Ed Justice Jr., and he's also got one specifically for his black and white under Leica Justice. And Ed also has a really, really, really cool book if you want to just see how his family is in racing and just racing in general. It's called The Legacy of Justice. You can purchase it on Amazon, and we have the link at edjusticejr.com. And if you want to see Ed's photo gallery, you can go to edjusticejr.com. And also, if you were able to stay this whole presentation, we're announcing that Ed has a private collection. He's got over 100 vehicles. You can see the Spaceballs hovercraft Mercedes-Benz SL 2001 limited edition in person. It's great. I was fortunate enough to take a tour when we were planning to do an automotive academy with Ed before COVID hit. So when COVID opens up, Ed's down to let you guys check it out. Just contact them through justiceprivatecollection.com. Now, Ed, anything you want to say bye to the crowd really quick before we end it?
No, if you love automotive history and 100 years worth of history, this is what the book looks like. It's Dale Inman, famous crew chief for Richard Petty, got a copy the other day. I talked to him for quite a while on the phone. He told me how much he enjoyed it. It's NASCAR, IndyCar. You know, my family, we've been involved in 75 out of the 104 Indy 500s, drag racing, early racing, contemporary racing. I think you'd really enjoy it. Eddie Wood, the Wood brothers race team. You know, anyway, it's been accepted by a lot of people. So if you got an interest, I think you'd really enjoy it. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ed. And thank you all for logging in. We hope you have a great December. And if you missed the beginning of the program, check us out in about a couple weeks. We'll have the video up on YouTube. And have a great day. Thank you.